The world today is being affected by a large variety of environmental concerns, with many blaming global warming for the problem. The flour and fresh food sector was particularly hard hit by the environment just this month when a volcanic ash cloud grounded planes to Europe and affected deliveries to markets.
The situation is slowly going back to normal, and I am glad to say that we will be able to service our markets, particularly for the Mother's Days in Europe over the month of May. This is important particularly because soon after May we go into the lower season, although really Kenya is able to supply throughout the year.
In a bid to address some environmental concerns, global carbon retail standards have been drawn up. Representatives of the agro-food and flour sector met in Nairobi to understand how to manage this.
We expect to see what's going on in other parts of the world and to contribute to the debate on what kind of standards we have in place, the kind of methodologies that are being adopted, and the acceptability of these standards in the marketplace, and therefore what kind of expectation do we expect to have to face.
The International Trade Center has planned to roll out this pilot to several other countries in 2010 to 2011 to provide an opportunity for stakeholders to understand the new ISO standards on carbon footprints.
The ISO standard that we're looking for is a harmonized standard on an international level. And the problem is today that we have a big flora of standards that is untransparent and very hard to be have certificates on all that different labels. And this is an opportunity for the region, I think, to be able to actively influence the international standard. So you can argument and communicate your needs and priorities in this region to the ISO level.
Today's consumers are more aware of the environmental concerns and are calling on companies to reduce carbon footprint. Consumers can now be very picky about what they buy and whether it has had an effect on the environment.
This is yet another one of those standards that we will address, we will deal with. And we feel quite confident that the consumers want to know that they have, if you like, a contribution towards ensuring that whatever they buy is produced environmentally, in an environmentally friendly environment.
Most of the carbon-related products that are produced here are quite good in comparison on a global market. What you need to make sure is that the methodology that is used when to calculate the carbon emission, that is based on your priorities and needs in this one. So your private sector actually can, to a low cost, verify it, and to a low cost also implement and using the standard when it's implemented.
An investigation by the Soil Association last year showed that carbon emissions per capita in Kenya are only 2% of what they are in the United Kingdom. This is a factor that has boosted Kenya's horticulture industry, which brought in $924 million into the economy last year. It was the biggest foreign currency earner for the country.
Actually, our production systems in Africa in general are much greener than the production systems in Europe, because in Europe for a good part of the year they've got to warm up the environment under which they produce their crops, and they've got to light up the areas where the crops grow, because crops require warmth and also light. In Africa we get it free, the sunlight and the heat, so crops grow much more naturally here now, and because of that we use much less energy in our production. So we emit less greenhouse gases in our production patterns than is the case in Europe.
The East African community relies heavily on agro-industry products, and while there are fears that the introduction of carbon labeling poses potential non-tariff barriers to exporters, the Kenya Bureau of Standards is keen to address this.
If a country introduces a carbon labeling system, it means that if you do not yourself do a carbon labeling, then maybe you might not have that market access. So of course that means there's a negative impact there. On the other hand, there is the issue of you complying by having the carbon footprint. But of course there's always an added cost of verification or certification, whatever you wish to call it, that would then make maybe our products more expensive.
Yes, it's about standards, but it's also about trade. And it's a question of how do you want to conduct your trade vis-a-vis your own local production. And here we are very concerned to see that these standards are not going to be used as technical trade barriers or non-tariff trade barriers, or for just protecting local markets where we want to have a fair share of the trade.
Moving forward, it is expected the event will provide the first step involving stakeholders from the horticultural and agro-food sectors in East Africa in understanding how environmental issues impact trade, as well as prepare for the adoption of international environmental standards.